Polyethylene glycol. There's a tongue-twisting name for you, but you probably heard it or at least seen it written about because it is an ingredient in laxatives. You'll find it in various creams and in toothpaste as a texturizing agent. You find it in personal lubricants. And you probably heard about it in the context of the COVID vaccines because it is used to encapsulate the spike protein in the vaccine so that it can penetrate into cells. But there's another very, very interesting application of polyethylene glycol. And I encountered that in Stockholm, in Sweden, in the famous Vasa Museum. Now, the Vasa is a ship that has been essentially totally restored. It was first built in 1626 by Gustavus Adolphus, the King of Sweden, and it was to be the pride of his navy. It was supposed to be the flagship, the most modern ship at the time. And he fancied himself as being a designer of ships. And he designed the Vasa. Turned out that he wasn't all that good at designing ships because the Vasa sank almost immediately after leaving port when it was launched. And it took 150 men to the bottom of the ocean with it. And that's where it lay for well over 300 years until it was brought to the surface using cables after a scheme to fill it with ping pong balls and cause it to come to the surface failed. So they managed to raise it and put it into a museum. But of course, there were problems because the wood had absorbed a tremendous amount of water, bottom of the ocean, and it had swelled. And when the water began to evaporate, as the planks began to dry out, they shrank and they began to just break down, and something had to be done. Well, it turned out that after much experimentation, they discovered that replacing the water with polyethylene glycol, which would not evaporate, would maintain the structure of the wood. It wasn't an overnight operation. It took 17 years of constant spraying with polyethylene glycol to replace the water in the wood. But eventually they did, and there was no further deterioration. But then another problem cropped up. While it was sitting in the ocean, bacteria, of course, had infiltrated the wood, and some of these bacteria, the so-called sulfate-reducing bacteria, produced sulfuric acid, especially after using iron as a catalyst, and iron was available from the nails in the wood. So this was another problem, that sulfuric acid was slowly being produced inside of the wood, and that was eating away the wood. So something had to be done. And now they are trying to treat it with something called pentetic acid, which complexes iron and prevents it from acting as a catalyst. So chemistry has come to the rescue of the Vasa. And if you ever go to Stockholm, you can drop in and see it. In fact, it is Stockholm's main tourist attraction. Take a look at the Vasa. It's absolutely awe-inspiring when you're looking at something that was built in 1626. And it looks, after restoration, just like it looked then. It is absolutely awe-inspiring. So thumbs up for polyethylene glycol, at least in this application. And that for today is our Cup of Joe.